Adriel. And how are you today?
Fantastic, and good evening to you, Paul. We're on opposite sides of the world, and I'm excited to be having this conversation.
I know we've done really well to sort of align ourselves, considering we was that far. When we was communicating this morning, I was trying to do my sums in my head. I was going on Google, see where you was, see where I was. Perfect timing.
Well, since our last email, I had 8 hours of sleep. I worked out and I had breakfast, and you've just been at work all
Yeah.
day. We're at two different stages, but we're feeling good.
And you're getting up to start your day, and I'm getting ready to go to bed. So amazing. What a way to
That's
do
right.
business and to talk about something we were both passionate about as well.
That's right. No, I'm looking forward to this.
Brilliant. And whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in New York. So I grew up here. I left for many years. Lived in North Carolina. Lived in California. Worked on environmentalist work and sustainability work in both those states in two very different sectors, and then came back to New York about 2 years ago.
Right. And New York is a I've been there three times. Amazing place. Tell me about, and in fact, the first time I went there, they had a snowstorm, which was a freak storm. Um, and I have never seen snow like it. It was meant, snow season, but it's the first time I've ever seen it closed JFK for a period of time. Is there any examples of climate change that you're seeing in New York?
Oh my God. I mean, 2 months ago, the Canadian fires came down and blew smoke all over New York. It was June. So my daughter was born on June 1st,
Right.
and literally she's 5 days old. So she was born on a Thursday. That Tuesday, the smoke from the Canadian wildfires was so bad in New York, you couldn't leave your apartment. Just could not go outside. It was as bad as anything I'd ever seen living in Northern California, which also gets pretty bad. New
Yeah,
York has
yeah.
never seen anything like that. I grew up here. My family's lived here our whole life. Nothing like that has happened, even though Canadian wildfires are regular and healthy and that happens normally. It was just earlier in the season, bigger, stronger, faster. The winds blew them down in New York. New York City was hazy. It was orange. It was toxic. It was so bad that I have like window AC units. So you
Right.
install an air conditioning in your window instead of central cooling. And the smoke was getting through that filter.
No.
So we had to take my 5 day old daughter to another building that had central AC where you could actually, and we just stayed in there for 3 days. This
Wow.
was 3 months ago in New York City. Nothing ever like it. The photos, it looks like Mordor for any Lord of the Rings folks. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it looks like evil incarnate. And that was the summer. And on the other end of it, every winter, I grew up playing in the snow. You mentioned we call them nor'easters. When
Yeah,
we got
yeah.
like a big crazy snowstorm. The nickname is a nor'easter. I
Right.
haven't seen snow for Christmas in like 5 years.
Wow.
It's just I don't know, it's just gone. And when you do that in one of the most populated cities on earth, the centers of finance, the center of so much technology, the center of so much industry, very important people, really this starts to hit them, very wealthy people, it starts to hit them. Climate change is not a problem that's like, oh, it's almost like poverty is a problem that you could almost say is over
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
like say that's a problem of that border and it doesn't touch my world. Climate change, you can't run it like it's not something you can push off to another country, another state, another city block. Like it's
For
here for
real.
all of us. Doesn't matter what your economic status is, what your city is like. It's just in your face, and yeah, it was quite the topic of New York City this year.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Because it's real, isn't it? You can touch it now. It's not as if you can't touch it. It's so real.
You can touch it, you can smell it, you can see it, yeah, you know when it's there and you know when it's
And
gone.
and in, we can digest it more, if it's dust in the air. It's ridiculous. So Adriel, we feels like we've been talking forever and we've known each other. I think we've only just started chatting to each other on LinkedIn for the last couple of weeks or so, but I know about what you're doing and what you're working on. But for the benefit of our audience today, can you tell us about your background story and your origin of where you come from?
Yeah, my career has all been in technology startups. So ever since high school in some ways, but we'll start with college. There's a lot of tech startups working in the sustainability and the environmentalist world. Early on, it was like a land use platform where you can go on private property. So we worked with a lot of environmental groups around that. Then I worked at an electric self-driving vehicle company, learned a lot about batteries and electric transportation. I've been on the nonprofit on the board of an environmental nonprofit for a very long time. So I've been in and around that world forever, mostly from a tech startup perspective,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to get more people outside, scale technologies that we need to fight climate change. And currently, I'm director of sales at GreenPlaces, which is a carbon accounting software company. So
Right.
we help businesses measure their carbon emissions and report to various regulations, build plans to become carbon neutral, build their science-based targets and net zero strategies. So my entire career has been about how do you use technology and mostly, but not exclusively, software to help decarbonize the world, help figure out how to make more people care about climate and the environment, help businesses do this stuff at a scale that you really need to be able to solve these problems. So my background is mostly in sales. I've started a few companies, been early at a couple of other companies, and trying to figure out how to bring startups to sustainability and vice versa.
And when did you start? When did your career in this environment start?
Probably in the sustainability world around 2015. So that's
Right.
when I joined the nonprofit, and that's when I started Roamer, which was like Airbnb for the outdoors. So
Right.
imagine if you can go, private property is a bigger deal in the United States than it is in a lot of other nations. But in the United States, something like 80% of our land is private property. And that number is much higher on the eastern part of the United States. Western United States has tons of national parks. Eastern United States, some of those amazing property is all private property. So what we tried to do then is to say, wouldn't it be amazing if you can go out on people's private property, pay them a fee, have insurance cover it all, and go hiking, fishing, camping, hunting if that's allowed, whatever the landowner allows you to do. If you can get people from cities out to private property, 20 minutes away to explore that land, you can put a ton of money into sustainability, a ton of money into environmentalism, open up this incredible access to land. And so that we worked with environmentalist group, land use nonprofits, things like that. And that was kind of my first step into the environmentalist sustainability worlds where met technology.
Yeah. And you mentioned now that you're putting together people's strategies. What is that strategy? How's that evolved? So from 2015, was there much uptake? Was there appetite to do that sort of work compared to what there is now? Has there been changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I like to just paint the picture of what corporate sustainability has been over the last, call it 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
In the 80s and 90s, a couple of rogue companies were coming out that kind of said, like, we can be a good company, good for the planet, and also be very profitable. So Ben and Jerry's and Patagonia kind of come to mind as the two big companies like that in the United States in particular. Patagonia said we're going to do super high quality stuff. It's all going to be reusable, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to give back to the planet all the time. And we're going to be one of the world's most profitable, successful fashion brands. Ben and Jerry's, same thing. They had a three-leg stool of people, profit, and planet. And how do you give back to the planet and be as environmentally friendly and thoughtful as possible
Yeah, yeah.
and build one of the most profitable ice cream companies ever? They were seen as like just crazy people in the like, all right, there's these weird rogue, 60s hippies turned 80s businessmen
Yeah.
who are doing this. Over time, that evolved a little bit. And I'd say in the mid 2000s, maybe early 2010s, sustainability moved from this like rogue, crazy thing that a couple of people are doing to more like a cutting edge marketing strategy. So there are no requirements, there's no regulation, you don't have to do anything, no one expected it. But lots of companies started talking about sustainability because they realized if they talk about sustainability believably, they'll be able to charge higher prices, win more market share, hire younger employees more successfully.
Yeah.
So lots of software companies, you can think of Google and Microsoft, started doing really cutting edge things around sustainability. Lots of retailers, people like Starbucks started talking about this more, not because it's like a core part of their strategy, but it was just sustainability as a marketing tool. And then right around 2015, things started actually getting a little more serious. And this moved from the marketing department into the legal, the risk, the financial department. And all of a sudden, these large companies realized if they don't figure out how to do sustainability well, they won't be able to sell their products in Europe.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are existing requirements.
Yeah.
They realize if they don't figure out sustainability, they're going to have to pay higher insurance premiums on their overseas factories, which are more likely to flood or be hurt by wildfires. they don't figure out sustainability, eventually the SEC in the United States is going to regulate public companies on this, and they're going to be unprepared. If they don't figure out sustainability, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, is not going to give them funds or is going to charge a higher interest rate for their funds. So this move from early on, this like rogue cutting edge thing, into the marketing department, into in the late 2010s, the finance or the legal department. And then right now we're at this moment where this is just about compliance.
Yeah.
Like you can use your sustainability strategy as good marketing. You can use it to be cutting edge. You can use it to save money. But it's really about, there are laws now that you're going to have to comply with. The SEC is going to come out with something for the United States. People say October. I think it would get pushed a little bit, but like call it within a year for sure. In Europe, this is already regulation. Even if the SEC delays, California state, largest, the 8th largest economy in the world or something like that, is going to have its own climate regulation by 2025. So the state of the industry has moved from this like weirdo thing into maybe this is good marketing, into maybe we should be thoughtful about this, into this is just the law. And if you don't know your sustainability metrics, that's as illegal and as bad of a fiduciary as not knowing your financial metrics. Yeah. You just have to know those numbers. You have to report on it. It's about compliance. And there's pros and cons to that we can talk about it. But right now we're moving into the next phase of this, which is sustainability.
You discussed those stages then. Were there triggers? Do we have any trigger points that was making people think that way, or did it just evolve?
Yeah, a little bit. I'd say there was kind of a soft trigger for the first evolution of sustainability as marketing, and then more of a hard trigger for that next evolution of sustainability as compliance. The soft trigger is a lot of culture, media, and what we're just learning, right? Like I talk about, like in the early 2000s, March of the Penguins won an Oscar, and A Convenient Truth won an Oscar. And all of a sudden people saw climate change documentary. Michael Moore was making documentaries, and millions of people were seeing. It just became part of the conversation a little bit more. We started like, in the 90s, it was like, is climate change real? Most people say yes. There's probably still some debate. And that just sort of went away by like 2010. It was just like, everybody knows this. So there's these like soft pressures coming around for marketing leaders at companies to say, hey, like my kids care about this. My audience cares about this. Like it's everywhere. Maybe I can care about this as well. So that's what soft pressures, that was kind of a trigger in moving into sustainability as marketing. The hard trigger to move into compliance are laws, right? If you look at the past even 18 months in the United States, in March 2022, the SEC announced its climate disclosure rule, which means if you're a publicly traded company, you're going to have to report your metrics. Shortly thereafter, I think this was November of 2022, the federal government said that if you do over, I think it was like $7.5 million in business with the US federal government, you have to report to the Carbon Disclosure Project. And the federal government, the world's largest customer. So that means all these different companies have to report into CDP. And then you had other hard triggers where some of the world's largest companies, Salesforce and Microsoft, leading the way in many ways, said if you want to sell us products, we need to know your carbon footprint. And the European Union has said this for a while, and now started regulating foreign companies that do business in the European Union and say, if you want to do business in our country, if you want to have over, I don't remember, a couple hundred employees and over X amount of revenue, then you need to know your metrics as well. Those are hard triggers that basically said, hey, if you're a CFO or a chief legal officer, you better get this stuff figured out or your company is just not going to succeed. I think those are the two big trigger points of those two big shifts.
Interestingly, a lot of the things you're talking about is mainly peer pressure and doing business with other people. You haven't mentioned, or you did touch on some cost, but is there a cost situation? Because we're in the middle of a global energy crisis as well. So in the UK, I'm seeing a lot of that driving what we're doing because they've seen that the reporting all their carbon figures and trying to drive them carbon figures down actually benefits them in their pockets as well. So when we haven't really got the peer pressure because we've been bombarded by the crisis of energy as well. So, but I can see us coming out of the energy crisis into more of what you're saying, regarding the, because we really, so for us in the UK as well, we're seeing scopes 1 and 2 really being focused on. Scope 3, not so much. But you're saying you're seeing that across the board regarding each 3 scopes, yeah?
A bit. So I'll say two things. The first about scopes. Scope 1 and 2 is still definitely the priority. It's
Mm-hmm.
most of what's being regulated. It's most of what's being asked
Yeah.
for. I think you can get by and not measure scope 3. And honestly, if you don't care that much, like, and you're trying to do the basic compliance stuff, you can get by on scope 1 and 2 for another couple of years. Eventually,
Yeah.
you'll have to, but like,
Exactly.
you can be mostly fine. And there's, again, pros and cons I'm happy to talk about. On the cost side of it, I didn't talk much about that, but there's a lot of opportunity for cost savings. So I'll say sustainability broadly, and then I'll focus it on energy.
Yeah.
Well, people talk about sustainability. People who don't understand sustainability talk about sustainability as a tax. Like, oh, I got to do yet another thing. I'm running my business. How can I also think about
Exactly.
sustainability? That's not what it is. Sustainability is about reducing waste. It's about saving money, right? Sustainability is about how do you have more efficient shipping, which is usually cheaper? How do you have less waste in your operations, which is usually cheaper? How do you
Beneficial.
have less plastic in your goods, or like shipping smaller boxes, all of which is usually cheaper? Like, I don't know, the example comes to mind of Athletic Greens, which is this very big, valued at a few $1 billion nutrient vitamin company. They, for a very long time, shipped these big boxes that were mostly air, and it was just like this very big way of delivering a small package of a dietary supplement. Over the last couple of years, they got more into sustainability. They started purchasing offsets. They were measuring emissions. They were thinking about what they can do. And they realized, hey, if I reduce the size of my packaging and I reduce the plastic spoons in there and I condense things and I get rid of the big box and put in a smaller one, it might cost me some R&D money. I'm going to save a ton of money on shipping, on packaging, and all these other things. And that will reduce my carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So I say that because sustainability, if you start looking at your operation through the lens of sustainability, you're going to find a lot of waste that will actually save you money. And that is true in energy more than almost any field. So I like the example of restaurants because every nation understands that equally. Restaurants, energy can be 3 to 5% of their total costs. So, substantial. And when you're talking about really tight margins, that's a significant amount of money. If you start thinking about energy through the lens of sustainability and less waste, you can often save like 30% on your utilities. You can save it by switching to LEDs, and all of a sudden you're spending X% less on energy. You can save it oftentimes just by tracking energy. So I work with a client that basically installed software on every single restaurant location. They've got about 40 locations, the one I'm thinking about. And they just started measuring utility use. They measured live every 48 hours, this updates, how many megawatt hours they're using, how that changes per square foot, what the carbon emissions of that is, what the cost of that is. And they compared all their restaurants against each other. And they said, hey, my top 25% use an average of $1 megawatt hour per square foot. My bottom 25% use 8 megawatt hours per square foot. So looking at that, it was like, oh my goodness, like I got restaurants that are costing me 8 times as much in utilities than others. Yeah. Why is that? What they're finding is the managers, some of them just leave the door open all day long, which makes the air conditioning work harder. They do that because the door's kind of tough to push open and they don't feel like getting it fixed. The door's open all day long. They do that because one of the managers turns a backup oven on first thing in the morning and runs it all day, even if it's never going to get used. Yeah. They do that because they have really bad measurement of all their appliances. And they don't know what's an old appliance, what's an Energy Star appliance, where they can get tax credit for a more energy efficient appliance. And they're just using a ton more energy. So all these things add up. And all of a sudden, if you start focusing on that, great, you save carbon emissions. If that's your goal, I'm really happy about that. The planet's really happy about that. You talk about the customers, you're going to make more money. Like you have more profit if you use less energy, if you're more thoughtful about it. So you got to be, so there's a
think of how many more, think of how many meals they would have had to sell to make that cost back up.
It could be,
if they make that saving, they sell less food, couldn't they?
I've seen clients who have saved 75, smaller restaurants, again, this 40 restaurant location client, they've saved like $75,000 a year on energy, once they start tracking and measuring it and doing
Yeah,
something
yeah.
about that's a full-time employee. That's
Mm-hmm.
they basically took all this money and gave employees bonuses. They
Yeah.
told the manager any amount of money you save compared to our baseline year, redistribute to your employees as gifts. But 75,000, that's 10,000 sandwiches they have to sell. Like
Yeah.
that's a significant amount of money that
Contribution
you
to
can
their
use to the bottom
rents and their rates on their properties. It all adds up, doesn't
line.
it? It's
100%.
straight on the bottom line. Yeah. By the way, this is all music to my ears. Actually, I'm really lapping that what you're saying.
I'm talking your book, Paul. I'm talking your book.
Do you know what? What really makes me smile is you're telling us this story in New York, yeah, and that's your experiences. I can tell you exactly the same stories in the UK, and I'm sure in Thailand, in Africa, wherever we have a restaurant group, exactly the same stories could come out.
That's right.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
Regulation varies. I can guarantee regulation in other places is going to make you do this. And
Yeah, yeah,
regulation, again, pros and cons. The pros, it forces everyone to a baseline. The con is most people are fine with the baseline and are not going to go above it. Pick your poison. Uh, but something like energy is like everybody can do that, and we haven't even touched upon like the amount of money you can save with renewables, right? Just like talking about solar panels. There's a great story I like. A Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisee, KFC, opened up in California, and they were trying to figure out, very hot in Southern California, and they expected long lines through their drive-through, and so to save the cars from cooking in this long line, they basically built this like overhang over where the drive-through would be, so cars are in the shade. And you also realize that on this overhang, they can get a tax credit if they put up solar panels.
yeah, yeah.
So they said, like, maybe we'll get some PR. Maybe people will like it. It's California. Everybody likes solar panels. Let's do this. They made their money back on the solar panel investment in 12 months, just got their money back, break even. And then after that, they were generating all the power they needed to run their restaurant for solar panels. Like
Crazy.
they spent zero money on it. And you can Google the story. You can just Google like KFC Southern California solar panels. You'll find the story.
Yeah, yeah.
We have like there's just so much innovation. If you can measure your stuff, you can reduce the amount of used stuff, and you can use better stuff, meaning
Yeah.
use renewable energy or build your own solar panels or use Energy Star appliances, whatever. Like, how do you want me to sell you? Do you want me to tell you it's better for the planet? You want me to tell you you'll save money on it? You want me to tell you your customers and employees are going to love it? You want me to tell you you'll get a better loan from a bank because banks have sustainable finance that's at 5% interest instead of 5.8% interest? Like,
Yeah.
tell me what you want to hear, and I'll tell you that it
And it's going to
exists.
increase the value of your business as well if you wanted to sell that business because you've created a sustainable business. It all starts to stack up, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you're touching on energy here, but one of the things that I picked up on your profile is you talk about ESG. Now, where does ESG fit into all of this? Because, energy, you got I always say the E, we put the E into ESG, but obviously it's a bit more than that. It's the governance and that side of it. Can you tell us what your belief is for ESG now and for the future?
Yeah, so ESG broadly is defined as environmental, social, and governance rules for a company. And it's this acronym that came out, I think like the United Nations coined it in like 2004 or so, to say like we need to get companies aligned to care about things that the world cares about. And ESG can begin to be a framework where we start speaking the same language.
Mm-hmm.
The environmental side is mostly understanding things like carbon emissions, waste. If you're a manufacturing plant, how much waste are you putting into the river nearby? Like that's easy to understand, and that's where I specialize in thinking and talking about. The social side is things like diversity and inclusion. How many people of what gender are on your board? How many people of what race work for you? How many people of what age work for you? How many opportunities are there? How much do you give back to your community? That one's it's also easy to measure, what's good and what's bad. There's not quite as much regulation around that. Some's coming out and there's some like soft pressure. So for example, I might be getting some details wrong, but Goldman Sachs, like the largest bank in the world or investment bank in the world, they won't take your company public unless you have a woman on the board.
Right.
That's for the social side, because they just said like it's bad business to not have at least one female on the board.
I'll get that.
We don't get involved. So that's the social side. And then governance is about making sure there's no corruption, there's no bribery, everyone's following the rules, there's board oversight of big decisions, pay transparency, Anti-Slavery Act, things like that. ESG has evolved over time. I'll focus specifically on the E side of it because that's what I understand a little bit better. Again, there's a few categories of it. A lot of it, for most of your listeners, will be covered by measuring your carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So you talked about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. These are just ways of categorizing the impact that your business has on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what most regulations want to know that you're measuring. There's some nuance there of like, what do you report on? What do you include? How do you talk about, if you're, again, manufacturing plant, dumping waste into a river, that's not directly included in your carbon footprint. There's other things you might need to do. But understanding that data, reporting on it, and building a plan to move it in the right direction with environmental work that's mostly down, with social work that's mostly up, but moving in the right direction is what ESG is all about. And there's pushback on it now saying it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time. Most of it is just about glossy reports and PR and things like that. I've worked in ESG. I'm the first person to say there's 100% truth in that, and a lot of companies are just spinning wheels and using ESG as a PR thing. And we can talk about the cons to it.
Yeah.
But I think the fact of it is that you need some sort of strategy around all these things. Call it what you will, but like you should think about your environmental impact, your social impact, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
And B, giving people guidelines and words to define these things for people who would never think about it otherwise, that is beneficial, and that has a lot of value.
I like ESG for the framework. It creates a framework for organizations to follow. There isn't compliance for this. We don't have to do this, do we? It's just a nice thing to do. But also, I like it for the people. I work for an organization that's got an ESG policy, and it's that side of it that I think it brings together regarding the staff wanting to work for an organization because it has an ESG policy.
Yeah, I like in the US, there's a lot of pushback over the last 12 months against ESG, and certain states have been saying like they don't want their state pension funds investing in ESG funds.
Right.
Like Florida and Texas did that, where they're like, we don't want our money in ESG funds. It's all nonsense and politicized and whatever. And so there's a discourse happening in the United States. I think all conversation is healthy, so nothing against it. But then I think it was the CEO of Coca-Cola was asked, what do you think about this push? Like, you guys have a huge ESG program. What do you think about this pushback? They basically said, like, I don't care what you call it. Like, you want to call it something else, call it something else. But having less sugar in our stuff, it's good. Like, our customers want that. Yeah. Having more people of various races and genders working for us, like
diversity.
We found that's pretty good for us. Like having a lower, like using less water, like, I don't know, call it what you want, but we're running out of water in our reservoirs. We should use less water. Like, so basically he said, and other people.
And I'm just going to guess what he's going to say, running our business properly regarding the governance. Why
having
not?
Good governance? Like,
why?
Yeah, why? Like,
why not?
We don't want corruption and bribery.
Exactly.
And slavery in our planet. Like, no, it just feels bad. So call it what you will. But I think I agree with you. I like that it's a framework. I like that everyone knows the language.
Yeah.
We can debate the nuance of it, but most people weren't even thinking about this stuff
and
had no language to talk about it until ESG came out.
Yeah. I've got an organization that I've helped him write his ESG policy, and there's certain things about it. I'm glad that he's taken the journey of writing this policy and putting it all together. There's things I don't like about it because he's not sharing it with his staff. But I think it's a starting point for this organization. We're working with them. We're looking at ISO 50001. So there's lots of things that could evolve from it. And he will catch up with the idea of the framework. At least he's got the framework. He didn't have that before. So it's early days, and the UK haven't really grasped ESG. It's starting to, but you asked me last year about ESG. I would have had to go and Google it and have to learn about it. I've done a training course actually at Christmas, but I've had to go out, and it has been very American based, but it's starting to come into the UK probably the last 6 months. And the organizations I'm working with, have American links or overseas links. So we are slowly evolving into it.
What's very interesting about ESG, especially around the debate about whether it's valuable or not, it's not driven by like a bunch of tree hugging hippies who are trying to like. It's driven by the most capitalistic force on earth, which is global finance.
Yeah.
Like, who wants ESG stuff, whatever you want to call it? It's BlackRock and Vanguard and Bank of America and Barclays Bank. Like, it's not, some nonprofit somewhere who's banging on the table and saying we all got to do good. It's the global finance movement that controls all money and has one motive and one interest in the whole world, that's maximizing returns on their investment.
Yeah.
So if you want to debate whether this is good or bad or liberal propaganda or a waste of money and time, you can debate it. And my argument is just going to go back to like, would global finance for this if they didn't think it'll give them more money?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Adriel, I want to go back to right at the beginning of our conversation. You talked about the likes of Ben and Jerry. You describe them as possibly in the hippie type of organization. I'm not saying Ben and Jerry are that, but where are they now with all of this? So we know where they were back in 2010, 15 or whatever. Where are they now? What are they doing?
So they are continuing to try to stay cutting edge. So I'll talk about sustainability mostly. For Ben and Jerry's, they have done some really great things. So they power all their stores on renewable energy. And you can read this in
all of their stores, yeah?
All their stores and their factories are powered on renewable energy. Where they can, they build solar panels. They do power purchase agreements with their utilities. Where they cannot, they buy renewable energy credits. So we can talk about that. And this is all like they're owned by Unilever now. And so I was reading their ESG report recently, and so they talk about all this stuff. But their big sources of emissions are dairy, which obviously ice cream, very big, packaging, energy on their stores, and shipping, transportation of their goods. Those are kind of the big ones. So what I said, dairy, packaging, energy, shipping. Around energy, I'll start with first. So we said that they're using renewable energy. They're trying to reduce energy, and they talk about this publicly. Around packaging, they're doing a ton of innovation, spending a lot of money trying to figure out how to have zero waste packaging or use recycled materials for their packaging. Around shipping, a little tricky because they're shipping frozen goods, so it's not like you can just put it on a truck for too long. So that's sort of a challenge for them. But I don't know if they are doing this, but the way to solve that is trying to move your production closer to your distribution.
Yeah.
Again, they're global. I think they're global, but
they
definitely
in the UK.
So a little tricky. I think they manufacture mostly in Vermont. And around dairy, this is interesting. I was listening to their head of sustainability speak about this recently, but she was saying that, the answer is obvious: more vegan ice cream. Right? Like, that's what we should do. And so they did. They launched a bunch of vegan ice creams. They were the first luxury ice cream, high-end ice cream company to launch vegan ice creams. They really pushed into it. It just didn't really take. Like, customers just didn't respond to it really well. Even, Ben and Jerry's customers are like mostly liberal people who care about sustainability, broadly speaking, and stereotyping, whatever. But people want full fat, the good stuff with ice cream. So I think they are trying to balance what their customers want and staying ahead of trends and figuring out sustainability. So some of these struggles are not solved and maybe not solvable. Like, you're not eating ice cream to save the planet. You're eating ice cream because you just broke up with your girlfriend and you need some ice cream. Or you have a new girlfriend and you want to go get ice cream. Like, why are you eating ice cream? It's to have a good time, or somehow to have a good time. You don't always want to sacrifice.
Recreation, isn't it? It's recreation.
It's for recreation. And so they have struggles on figuring out their carbon footprint and how to reduce it in certain ways. But they're doing things like, all right, if we're going to work with dairy cows, can we try to make them pasture raised? Can we try to make them close to our facility? Can we try to give them low carbon feed, which reduces the amount of methane that cows produce? So, like, they're trying to figure stuff like that.
Yeah, it's on their agenda, isn't it?
They know that they care about it because they have a people, planet, profit three-stooled business model, which like is iconic for them, and they see everything through that lens. I think they're B Corp. Could be wrong about that, but they're like a benefit corporation, which means unlike a C Corp or an S Corp, it's written into their charter to care about this stuff. And their customers care. They want to see them continue to innovate. And if Haagen-Dazs beats them to the punch on the world's tastiest vegan ice cream, or if Haagen-Dazs is more renewable, or if Halo Top does this better, or if Jenny's ice cream figures out how to distribute closer to the farm or whatever, like they don't want to lose their core audience, and they've got to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you've written a book, or it's coming out, isn't it? When's it coming out? The end of this month or end of next month?
It's coming out in October, end of October.
Right.
It's called Attainable Sustainability, Building Your Corporate Climate Strategy.
Brilliant. Where can we buy that book?
It's going to be everywhere. So all the places you like buying books, you can buy the book. But at the moment, you can go to attainablesustainabilitybook.com, and you'll see some frameworks, some free content, and you'll be able to put your name down and reserve a book, and that'll be amazing. And I hope if you care about sustainability and you're trying to figure out your climate strategy, it's attainablesustainabilitybook.com.
Can you give us some an overview of it? Is there a synopsis you can give us now?
Yeah, so the premise is basically all companies, for all the reasons we've talked about for the last 45 minutes, need to figure out their climate strategy. It can be very confusing. The biggest companies on there hire chief sustainability officers and pay them $1 million a year to put 15 people under their team just to figure this stuff out. Most companies cannot afford that and do not want to do that. So this book is a guide to figure out what exactly you need to do the baseline work of measuring emissions, building a reduction plan, communicating it well, and how to go above and beyond if you want to, working on policy, purchasing carbon offsets, thinking about science-based targets, complying with different frameworks, avoiding greenwashing, which is a huge topic, especially in the UK, actually. The UK advertising standards is going after a ton of companies around greenwashing, suing them, fining them, putting out a ton of press releases against them. So you got to be really thoughtful about that. So the book is basically, you're like, if you're going to start building your climate strategy, this book should kind of cover you for the next 2-3 years and just give you everything you need to figure this stuff out, for the price of whatever, $15 instead of hiring a consultant or hiring a full-time employee.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to look that up myself. And I wish you all luck. I know what it's like to launch a book. But I do like the subject that you've given it, and I like the content that you've just given us an overview. And it's a consultant book all there that you can buy instead of going out and employing a consultant, isn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of the goal.
Even if you do employ a consultant, you can at least work with a consultant with that book to sort of
100%.
guide and support.
I've actually got a section. So the framework that I kind of developed after working with a lot of clients on this is called MRC, Measure, Reduce, Communicate. And you want to measure your climate metrics and your business metrics. You want to reduce internal emissions and stakeholder emissions. And you want to communicate on required reporting and voluntary marketing. That's all you need to do to build a good corporate climate strategy.
Right.
In it, I kind of talk about how to do this internally, how to do this on your own, things to think about. And I also say for something like carbon accounting, measuring your carbon emissions, you're probably, if you're a certain size business, going to want to work with a third party. It'll be easier. It'll be verified. If you're a publicly traded company, you have to get assurance on it anyway. So you're going to want to work with a third party. And I say, here's exactly what your options are from consultants to software companies. I have a section there that says, like, here's the questions you should ask anybody who's trying to sell you their services. Make sure you're not being duped, or you're not wasting your money, or you're getting something valuable. So I think many sustainability journeys can begin with $0. You assign someone internally on the marketing team or the finance team or the operations team who cares about this. Hey, like, get us going, measure our emissions using a free online calculator, like figure out the biggest place we can do something. It really doesn't have to cost you anything, and you can get that going for a little bit. But once you're entering a certain level, or you're publicly traded, or private equity is talking to you, or you want to do real marketing around this and you don't want to be slapped for greenwashing, you're going to have to work with external partners. And the goal of this book is to make you smart enough to be able to ask the right questions of any external partner that you might want to work with, so that you can move a lot faster, you can get a lot more out of them, and you're not just reliant on good salesmanship. I'm a salesperson.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that. No, I'm joking you.
Didn't give it away.
You've sold it to me. You've sold everything to me today. I want to buy everything from you.
call that a pod, baby. We're done. I say this all the time. And like, you don't want to buy something just because I'm a good salesman.
Yeah.
Like, that's not, like, I could be selling a bad product and I'm a good salesperson, and you're going to buy the bad product and be disappointed. And like, you don't want that. What you want to buy is a good product, and good salespeople work for good products because we hold ourselves to a high standard. And so you don't want to be like tricked by good salesmanship, convinced that my product can do things that it can't, whatever else. You want to be really thoughtful about how you enter this. This is really important. This is business critical. This is sitting with your CFO, your chief HR officer, your CEO is going to be talking about this on quarterly earnings reports. Like, you want to do this stuff really well. And so hopefully the book, or at least a summary of the book online or whatever, can kind of give you that first step and protect you in a lot of ways.
Well, Adriel, absolutely amazing. It's come to that stage where I just would like you, and you've given us so much information and content today. Is there anything you can give back to our audience today, just as a takeaway from today's conversation?
Yeah. Man, where to start? So I'll focus on energy because I know that's kind of the core of your audience. When you're looking at your locations and your retail infrastructure and the energy use you have a couple of options. The best option is to be basically energy independent, which means building out usually solar panels, because it's unlikely you're going to build out wind farms or nuclear energy for your own facilities. So that's the best option you have. But if that's not available to you and you're like, I just can't put solar panels on my buildings, it's just not an option for me, you have other options, and they actually don't cost you much money. You can be part of a community solar program, which means you will gather all the businesses in your area and say, hey, let's go build out a series of solar panels with our utility over here in this field, and we will draw energy from that. It's amazing. That's an incredible thing you can do. If that's not available to you, or you just don't have that political willpower, or utility doesn't support it, you can work with your utility directly and say, what are my options? If that's not available to you, you can purchase renewable energy credits, which are global markets where you can basically say, hey, I don't have this in my locality, but I'm going to support renewable energy somewhere else in my market. And then you can advertise that and say, we're powered by renewables. That's what Starbucks does. They don't have solar panels on every roof, but every Starbucks store, at least in the US, says we're powered by renewables because of renewable energy credits. There's a lot of different ways in which you can start thinking about, how do I move to clean energy? The most important thing for us to do globally is work on policy. Policy matters more than anything, even if you talk about energy. The biggest change that will happen in America is not a bunch of businesses deciding they want to put solar panels on it. It's the Inflation Reduction Act, the $500 billion that the U.S. government unlocked for the growth in renewables. That came from policy. So what I would give back is to say, you have options that don't have to be expensive, that don't have to require infrastructure, that don't have to be time consuming, and that can be profitable for you as you think about energy. It's an amazing place to start. It's an amazing place to think about your corporate climate strategy. And it's profitable. Investors care about it. Your customers and employees care about it. It's visible. You can talk about it. So I think you have a lot of options.
Yeah. Adriel, that's an awesome answer. Thank you very much. And thank you for aligning it with the energy experts that will listen to this and the audience today. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time. For you to commit to this. It's been really good to listen and to get to hear your story.
Oh, I gotta say, nothing I like to sound more than my own voice. So it's been a pleasure, Paul.
I know. I did. I think I managed to get some words in, and you stopped and paused. So it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It's been a really amazing chat. So thank you for your time, and please, you and your family stay safe in these times.
Yeah, thank you. You as well.
Thank you.